Welcome to Revenge Chronicles. Whether you're a long-time viewer or just discovering our channel, you're about to witness a story that will stay with you long after it ends. Today's tale involves secrets, betrayal, and a reckoning years in the making. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Margaret, and at 78 years old, I thought my days of fighting battles were behind me. I was wrong. Dead wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in November when I realized I had been the worst kind of coward for over 20 years. I was sitting in my kitchen, watching my granddaughter Emma, now 16, help her younger sister Lily, 12, with homework. The way Emma flinched when footsteps approached the door. The way Lily's shoulders tensed when she heard her father's voice calling from the living room. The way both girls seemed to hold their breath until they heard him leave for work. I had seen these same signs in my daughter Sarah 23 years ago. "Girls," I said quietly, "come sit with Grandma for a minute." Emma looked terrified. Did we do something wrong? That question broke my heart because I recognized it. Sarah used to ask me the same thing, always assuming she was the problem. Always walking on eggshells around David, her husband, and the father of these beautiful girls. "No, sweetheart. But I need to ask you both something very important, and I need you to trust me enough to tell the truth." I took Emma's hand in mine, noticing how she still had that nervous habit of picking at her cuticles that Sarah had developed at her age. "Has your father ever touched you in ways that made you uncomfortable? Has he ever asked you to keep secrets about things he's done or said?" The color drained from Emma's face. Lily started crying immediately. That was all the confirmation I needed. "I'm going to tell you both something that I should have said 20 years ago, and I'm going to spend whatever time I have left on this earth making sure he never hurts either of you again." You see, I had failed my daughter Sarah spectacularly. When she first married David at 19, I thought he was charming, successful, the perfect husband. When she started losing weight and becoming withdrawn, I told myself it was normal newlywed adjustment. When she stopped visiting unless David came with her, I convinced myself they were just busy building their life together. When she finally tried to tell me what was happening, I didn't want to hear it. "Mom," she had whispered to me one afternoon when David was at work and she had brought baby Emma over. "David, he does things. He says things. He makes me do things I don't want to do." I should have listened. I should have helped her pack her bags that very day. Instead, I said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Sarah, marriage is about compromise. Men have needs. You need to work harder at being a good wife." She never tried to tell me again. Over the years, I watched my daughter become a shell of herself. I watched David isolate her from friends, control every aspect of her life, and slowly break her spirit. And I told myself it wasn't my business. That I was being respectful of their marriage. That I was staying out of it. I was a coward. But watching my granddaughters exhibit the same fear, the same careful tiptoeing around a predator, I knew I couldn't be a coward anymore. Not when I probably had months, maybe a year or two left to live. Not when these girls had their whole lives ahead of them. "Emma, Lily, I want you to know that what your father does to you is not normal. It's not something you deserve. It's not something you caused. And it's going to stop today." I spent the next 3 hours listening to my granddaughters tell me things that made my blood run cold. David's late-night visits to their rooms. His inappropriate comments about their developing bodies. His insistence that they sit on his lap in ways that made them uncomfortable. His threats about what would happen if they told anyone. The same pattern he had used with Sarah. By the time Sarah came to pick up the girls that evening, I had made my decision. "Sarah, we need to talk. Girls, go pack some clothes. You're staying with me tonight. Mom, what's going on? David expects us home for dinner. David can eat alone. Forever, if I have anything to say about it. I told Sarah everything the girls had shared with me. I watched 20 years of suppressed memories flood back across her face. I watched her realize that her silence hadn't protected her daughters at all. I tried to tell you, she whispered. 20 years ago, I tried to tell you. I know, baby. And I failed you then. But I won't fail you now, and I sure as hell won't fail those girls. That night, I did something I should have done decades earlier. I listened. Really listened. Sarah told me about years of sexual coercion, financial control, emotional manipulation, and threats. She told me about the time she had tried to leave and David had convinced her that no one would believe her, that she was crazy, that she would lose the girls. She told me about the day she realized he was starting to look at Emma the way he had once looked at her. I've been trying to protect them, she sobbed. I never leave them alone with him anymore. I homeschool them so they are always with me. I thought if I could just watch them constantly. Sarah, you've been trying to solve this all alone. But you don't have to anymore. Over the next week, I became a woman on a mission. I contacted every family member, every friend, every person who had ever made excuses for David's behavior or told Sarah she was exaggerating. I called them all. I started with David's mother, Patricia, who had always treated Sarah like she wasn't good enough for her precious son. Patricia, this is Margaret. I need to tell you something about your son that you're not going to want to hear, but that you need to know. Oh, Margaret, if this is about one of David's moods, Sarah really needs to learn not to provoke him. Patricia, your son has been sexually abusing his daughters. Your granddaughters. The same way he abused my daughter for 20 years. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a full minute. That's impossible. David would never. Patricia, I have detailed accounts from both girls. I have documentation going back years. I have my daughter finally ready to tell the truth. Your son is a predator, and if you continue to make excuses for him, you're complicit. I called David's brother, his sister, his boss, his golf buddies. Every single person who had ever been impressed by his charm and success. I told them exactly what kind of man they had been defending. But my most important call was to Detective Rodriguez at our local police station. Detective, my name is Margaret Wilson. I need to report ongoing child sexual abuse, and I have 2 victims ready to provide testimony. The investigation moved quickly. 20 years of documentation that Sarah had been secretly keeping. Text messages David had sent to the girls that he thought he had deleted. Medical records that supported their accounts. Testimony from neighbors who had heard arguments and seen bruises over the years. David was arrested on a Thursday morning at his office, in front of all his colleagues. The same colleagues who had laughed at his jokes about keeping Sarah in line and told him how lucky he was to have such a submissive wife. The trial was brutal, but watching my daughter and granddaughters testify with courage I never knew they had was the proudest moment of my life. Sarah spoke clearly and calmly about 20 years of abuse. Emma, now 17, described years of inappropriate touching and threats with a strength that reminded me of the woman I used to be. Lily, at 13, looked her father in the eye and told the court exactly what he had done to her. David tried every defense his expensive lawyer could think of. He claimed Sarah was mentally unstable. He said the girls were lying for attention. He insisted he was a devoted family man who was being falsely accused. But 20 years of evidence is hard to ignore. When the judge sentenced David to 25 years in prison, I watched my daughter breathe freely for the first time in decades. I watched my granddaughters realize they would never have to be afraid in their own home again. But my favorite moment came 6 months later, at Emma's 18th birthday party. It was the first family gathering we'd had without David's presence looming over everything. Emma was laughing with her cousins, planning her college applications, talking about her dreams without that haunted look in her eyes. Lily had joined the school theatre program and was excitedly telling everyone about her upcoming performance. She was loud and animated and wonderfully, normally dramatic in the way 12-year-old girls should be. Sarah had started dating someone new, a kind man who treated her like she was precious instead of property. She had gone back to school and was training to be a counselor for domestic abuse survivors. If you're enjoying this story of justice and healing, consider subscribing to our channel for more powerful narratives like this one. As I watched my family rebuild, I realized something important. I may have failed them for 20 years, but I had spent my final years doing everything in my power to make it right. I had used my remaining time to ensure that the cycle of abuse ended with David, that my granddaughters would grow up knowing their worth, and that my daughter would finally have the life she deserved. 3 years after David's conviction, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave me 6 months. I spent those months watching Emma graduate high school as valedictorian, seeing Lily win the lead role in her school's production of Annie, and walking Sarah down the aisle when she married her counselor colleague, a man who had spent 2 years proving that love didn't have to hurt. On my last day, with all of them around my hospital bed, Emma took my hand and said, "Grandma, thank you for saving us." "No, sweetheart," I whispered back. "You saved yourselves. You just needed someone to believe you deserved saving." I died knowing that my granddaughters would never have to choose between speaking their truth and keeping family peace. I died knowing that sometimes the most important thing an old woman can do is stop being polite and start being brave. My name was Margaret Wilson, and at 78 years old, I learned that it's never too late to stand up for what's right. Even if you have to spend your last breath doing it. Thank you for staying with us through this entire emotional journey. If this story moved you, we'd love to have you explore more of our chronicles where justice isn't just a dream, but a hard-fought reality. Until next time, remember that speaking your truth is never too late.